in our sermons you had about the purpose of being a Christian, or the purpose of Christianity. And I don't know if you know, but maybe some of you have heard when Mark Sandoval has been here talking about disease and where disease comes from. And this is kind of one of the greatest points, but among others, among the doctrines that we'll be talking about, because we live in a time where I believe Jesus is coming in just a moment. And if we don't, as a church or as God's people, understand how the human being works and how salvation works, then we don't have anything to give when the crisis hit. I mean, we've had already a smaller crisis. I would call it the small time of trouble before the big time of trouble. And this time was here to teach God's people what to tell the other ones when the great crisis hit. I and Stephanie, we are coming from Denmark, and Stephanie has a small company of her own, and I work as a dentist in a practice, actually in two practices. I have Monday and Tuesday I treat children and a few homeless people. And Wednesdays and Thursday I work in a normal private practice as a dentist with adults. And I knew this message, or I came to know about the message before I was done with my education, which was very interesting, but not after a long time did I realize the impact of the message, not only upon my own life, but how much good this message can do to those that I treat every day. And I hope that by God's grace we'll come to understand better about the human being, how he works, not only to help our own hearts and understand how to be in health, but also that we should be able to represent God and help those out in the world who don't know how things work. Because there's a lot of people seeking for something greater than themselves, especially after this time that's been, where we realize, most of us at least are realizing, or a lot of us are realizing, that we cannot rely on the government. We cannot rely on the official church. We have to understand a message for ourselves so that we'll be able to stand in a great crisis on our own. So the topic, or the first topic for this afternoon, is called God's Most Difficult Task. And before Noah knew the title, he volunteered to have his picture on the title slide. And we all had a great laugh about that, because then he realized what the sermon was going to, or what the title was going to be about. But in reality, all of our pictures belongs up there, doesn't it? God's most difficult task. God's most difficult task is that he threw this ring to save us, everyone on the planet. And most of us don't realize that we need the ring to save us. We are like people staying in a prison, and Jesus comes and offers us liberty. And what happens when he offers the liberty in this prison? Most of us thinks that the food is really okay. In the prison we have a bed to sleep in, we have a roof over our heads, no rain is coming in. It's quite safe in there. And nobody really wants to get out. Well, that is very true. Do you remember the Israelites being stuck in Egypt? Do you know why God had to use such a long time and such many miracles before he freed them? Could he have not just slain down Pharaoh and let them out of Egypt? Because they didn't want to go. But for every trial God put towards Pharaoh, he made life harder for the Israelites so they would want to go. So we learned a little bit about the disconnection. Stephanie was talking about it. How we are now entering into this world with a disconnection. Now I took my adapters to illustrate a little bit, because last time I was in the US, it was my first time, and I was staying in a hotel with one of my good friends from New Zealand, and she brought an adapter, but she brought the wrong one. And she was trying to fit the adapter into the socket, and she just, in the end, she said, okay, if I keep doing this, I'm going to break it. She realized she brought the wrong one. I don't know if you know, but the New Zealand adapter looks, or the plug for the socket looks much like the American, just it's a little bit in the angle differently. So you can easily be cheated to think it's the right one when it's the wrong one. And she gave up trying to put it into the socket. And why did she give up? Because she would have broken it. And this is what Adam did. He fit perfectly into the plug of God, and inexplicably, he took himself out and tried to fit into another plug, which was not even really a plug if you think about it, because there's only one source of power. And he broke the plug for all eternity. It can never be restored. So, by the law of inheritance, now Adam and Eve passes on a life with the idea that I am God to every descendant coming after him. Which means that every one of us has Adam's broken life, the dead plug. You know, we should have been dead, or Adam should have been dead the moment he separated from God. Because what happens when you separate from the source of life? You have to die. But now God granted us a time of probation, which we call grace, time and circumstances, in which we have a period of time to replace the broken plug with another one. So this is Adam's dead life, and we all inherit it, since every one of us comes from only one life, the life of Adam. That means we have no source of orientation, and we don't know who we are. At least we believe we are something that we're not. So from the beginning of our lives, we see everything upside down. This is the picture you'll see if you believe yourself to be God. And this is the picture of reality. Do you know that the first image is the image whereby you see the world? You see, we have a tendency as Christians to believe that we have arrived at the bottom level here. Maybe it should have been on top. But our actions speaks of another picture. Whenever we are put in circumstances that are outside what we need, our reaction to that circumstance talks of a life that believes he's independent of God. We saw earlier that the identity man believes he has is that he thinks he's independent spiritually of a source of love. It means he believes he has possessions of his own. He believes he can create love. And the truth is, he is spiritually dependent on a love source, and he doesn't own anything, and he cannot create anything. But believing the lie, he also believes that he can have a personal loss and that he is a victim. If he was in the truth, he would know that he cannot lose anything, and he can never be a victim. But this is the heart of man. We have the loss and gain, and we will always move towards gain. In the lie, I will think I have possessions, I can create, so I would want to give from myself But since I cannot live from nothing, I have to take that something from somewhere. And being cut off from God, I will always have an expectation that where I give, I must also receive something back. My loss would be not to receive, receiving too little, or that something is taken away from me. The truth is, I have nothing of my own. I can create nothing, or I cannot create anything. I must take first before I give. And if I do that, I don't need anything in return. Wouldn't that be lovely? To never have another expectation from another human being. I would never be angry if I never again have an expectation from another human being.
Like heaven.
It would be like heaven. Hopefully we'll learn it before heaven. Yeah? My loss would be not to give, to keep something for myself. The thing is, I grew up and I did not know that something in me was wrong. I knew I could do wrong, but I was not aware. No one told me in church that something in you makes you unable to love. Have you ever heard that in church? I mean, what I've heard mostly in church is repent and believe, and God loves you. And if you have faith enough, your life will come around. But how will you have faith if you are separated from the source of faith? Is it a possibility? No. So we are in a bit of a pickle. Because we're stuck in a life that we cannot get out of. There is no way to get out of the deception, apparently. Because severed from God, you cannot reconnect. So, is the child aware from his birth that something in him makes him see the world upside down? It's just like my children's story this morning. When I was a child, could I have done something different than rebel against my mother? No, because the sin in me made me do it. Does it take away my responsibility? No. I still have self-government. I am the only one who can take responsibility of my thoughts and actions. But I have no guilt because I act out of compulsion. There is no choice. Now, as a small child, you may not understand exactly how to root up the evil of your heart. But as we become adults, this is what we need to learn, and this is what we need to teach our children so that they may learn it a little bit sooner than we did. Does the human being out there on the street understand that something inside of him makes him incapable of loving? If you speak to any kind of human being out there, would he say that he can love?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you believe that you love? We all believe that we love. But how do we know that we cannot love? Have you ever read that if you only love a few, you don't love at all? Have you ever read, for if ye love them which love you, what reward have ye? Do you know that Jesus tells you that you cannot love? Now, what do we do? Because love and selfishness looks very much the same to us. We can do a lot of good deeds, and they all look like love. But how do we know if it is or if it's not? We were staying with Christine and Jared for almost a week now, I think. We came last Friday. And I've seen they have little notes put on the wall, different places. And they have a saying that says, I think it's from Christ Object Lessons, maybe. It says, "It is in a crisis that character is revealed." So I brought a little picture of two trees. The first one is the, oh, maybe you can guess what it is. Do you know what it is? Do you have it in America also? Yeah, they look alike, all of them, apparently. The upper one is hawthorn. Do you have hawthorn here? Yeah? And the lower one, do you know what it is? It's an apple tree. So they look extremely alike, yeah? And this is love and selfishness. They look, on the outside, they look so much alike. How would you know which one is the apple tree and which one is the hawthorn? Maybe you could look at the leaves, but that would be cheating. Only look at the flowers. How would you test which one is which?
Maybe by smell.
Maybe by smell. I would say if you squeeze them a little bit, you will recognize that one of them will hurt you. Yeah? It has these little thorns. And this is what God has to do to us, to help us recognize what is love and what is selfishness. Now, God does not have any intentions of us, but to save us, He has to help us realize our issue. And we will be talking about now how He does that. We learned about the law of the universe, which by everything has to be measured. And everything was created to follow this law. And it is what we also call the law of life, that nothing can exist or function by itself, and nothing can function or do anything for itself. Everything must work as a channel. It has an entrance and an exit. Something before it is a cause, and after it we'll see the effect. It must take from outside resources to be able to give. And as long as everything works as a well-functioning channel, then all things in nature must take to give and works in a circuit. Now, every channel lives from a source of power. Now, how many sources of power in the universe is there? Only one source of power. So how many creatures lives from that power? All. Even Lucifer? So Lucifer may misuse the power of God, but he can only live by the power of God. So how does this work? There is only one power, and that's God's power. And by His power, and through the laws of nature, He controls every single effect in the universe. And by that, we can discard the belief of any coincidence. Everything is very carefully controlled by the power of God. Isn't that a great comfort? Do we believe it? Do we believe it when we get sick? Or if we lose someone close to us? Do we still believe that God controls the effects? Or do we get fearful and discouraged and depressed?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, who is in control of the sunshine? And the rain? Is he always so, even if there's a lot of rain? The question is, why did God curse the earth? Did he curse the earth? Do you remember it says in Genesis he cursed the earth for a man's sake? It says, unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. And to Adam he said, cursed is the ground for thy sake. In sorrow shalt thou eat it all the days of thy life. Thorns and also thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return unto the ground. Why?
Because Eve chose to disobey.
So you think it was to punish them?
No, I think it's to remind us that we are living under that curse of sin. When I go out and weed my garden, and I can go back 2 days later and there'll be more weeds to replace it.
Yeah.
There's always going to be thorns and thistles.
But why do we need to be reminded?
Because we forget if life's too easy and there's no weeds to pull.
Yeah, but why is it important not to forget? What's the purpose of cursing the earth? You know, this planet is the only place in the universe where the leaves fall off the trees in the wintertime. It's the only place where the flowers die when they're separated from their root. It's the only place where dysfunction appears when physical needs of nature are not met. And it is the only place of suffering and disease. Do you know why? Sorry?
I guess it's a lesson for the other inhabited world so they won't make the same mistakes.
We're surely a lesson for the other world. But he did not curse the ground for the other worlds, primarily. He primarily cursed the ground for man's sake because he wants to show us what happens to the human being when he is spiritually disconnected from his maker. Because something inside of you is wrong, and you won't see it until you are in a crisis. And if you don't see it, you can't take care of it. And if you don't take care of it, you will die eternally. You see, the only purpose of this life that God has given us is to get rid of the error of our heart. God tells us about disease and disasters of nature in the Bible if we go to Deuteronomy. But first, let's just talk about the flood. When we were going to America the last time, in the fall, for the first time, we were supposed to rent a car. And I was reading through some of the insurance papers for the cars before we went. And in this country, I mean, you are insured against anything and everything. I've never seen insurance papers like that before. And I was reading through them, and we don't have that saying in Denmark, probably because Denmark is very, very secular. But on the insurance papers, there is something called insured from acts of God. Were you aware? It's in the back of my mind, I might have heard it before, but I had never thought of it like that before. Now, the thing is just that most of us don't believe natural disasters to be an act of God anymore, at least in the country where I come from. But I believe that everything that happens around me is the act of God. He is not the cause of evil, but he must use the means available to help the human being understand the deception of his heart. So in Deuteronomy, we have a few texts to help us see the things from the Bible. It says, Moreover, this is coming from the chapters 28, 29, 30, and 31. And they're about the blessing and the curse. And if you haven't read it, I'd really encourage you to read it. Maybe in context with the rest of Deuteronomy. It's a very interesting book. It says, moreover, he, God, will bring upon thee all the diseases of Egypt which thou wast afraid of. This is if they leave God as a people. And they shall cleave unto thee also every sickness and every plague, which is not written in the book of this law, them will the law bring upon thee until thou be destroyed. And those words seem a little bit harsh, and they are serious, but God later in chapter 30 says, and it shall come to pass when all these things are come upon thee, the blessing and the curse, which I have set before thee, and thou shalt call them to mind among all the nations whither the Lord thy God hath driven thee, and shall return unto the Lord thy God, and shall obey his voice according to all that I command thee this day. Thou and thy children with all thine heart and with all thy soul, that then the Lord thy God will turn thy captivity and have compassion on thee. So when God brings about difficult things in our lives, he never means to harm. He just means to get our attention. But to get our attention is very difficult because none of us believes that we are so full of evil that we make ourselves sick. None of us believes that we are so full of evil so that if we were put in the right kind of circumstances, we would be able to kill our neighbor. None of us sees ourselves that way. At least most of us don't. And so God sometimes has to squeeze our circumstances a little bit. Just tighten us up a little bit to help us see our great, great need of a Savior. Because we all think that we can love, and we have no idea that our love is pure selfishness. So, where does disease come from, and how does it work? Heart attacks, cavities, and many other things. Have you ever thought, now I'm a dentist, so of course when I heard this message, my investigation started in my patients. And you have different thoughts as a dentist because you were brought up in a world of science, and as I said, Denmark is very secular, so the foundation of the medical system, but not even just in Denmark, everywhere in the world, is founded upon the belief that there is no God. That you get sick by accident. That if you touch your neighbor, he will also catch the disease. So, but I started investigating, and I thought to myself, if cavities comes from having a dry mouth, or eating the wrong kind of thing, or not brushing your teeth, then let's say sugar, because that's the main argument. Sugar is the enemy towards your teeth. Why, when you eat sugar, and a lot of it, do you only get one cavity in one tooth? Does all of the sugar just accumulate on one tooth? Why is it so that some people have a cavity and then they get an infection on the root, while others come in my door and they've never had a cavity in their life, and suddenly there's a great infection on just one tooth that has died without any seemingly thing coming from outside? How can it be that some of my patients, they brush their teeth and they do everything they can in their power to keep their teeth clean and eat a healthy diet, and they still get cavities, while other people can just eat whatever they please and never brush their teeth, and they never see a cavity at all? And so I started to ask different questions, and the Lord is very kind to me. Apparently, he knew I was going to be a dentist, so he helped me in my youth with a lot of cavities so that I could study myself and compare myself to my sister who grew up in the same home as I. Because I was very careful with brushing my teeth, and in periods, she was not so careful. Now, I got all the cavities of the family. I also have all the sweet teeth, I must say. But she also did eat whatever it pleased her, and she didn't get a single cavity. She got other symptoms. I tell you, all of my cavities that I've had, I got them within 2 years after my parents' divorce. I've never had one since. I'd never had one before. And I tell you, it came from my thinking. It was not an outside issue. The issue was not the divorce of my parents. But the issue was my interpretation of the divorce of my parents. To understand how the process of disease works, we must have some unchangeable references. Science today is largely built on empirics, going and making investigations, but having no standard to compare them against. If you have no standard to compare them against, you can make them say anything. Only your imagination is the limit. And the imagination of man is a deep, dark hole. So we need the laws of nature, and we need to know about the human being, his structure, his function, and his needs. And Stephanie went over some of these things on Friday, but I think it's good to just repeat a little bit. The structure of the human being is our anatomy. We have a brain, and actually we have 2 brains, or our brain is divided into 2 components, which are not connected. So one side of the brain, your right side of the brain, controls the left side of your body, and the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body, except the 12 cranial nerves, which are from your neck and up. And there are just a few of them that crosses over, but most of them stay on the same side. And the connection from the brain and down in the body are the neurons, and the nervebaner, the nerves. We call them the nerves, yeah. Lanes, I would call them nerve lanes, but I think that's just a Danish way of translating things. So here is the connection. I hope you can see it's maybe not so evident, but goes from one side of the brain to the other side of the body, and likewise on the other side. And we came to understand that we have not only a brain, we are not only made from chemistry, but we also have a spirit. And we have the understanding of the spirit of man that he is the one producing the thoughts, making the electricity in my body. He lives from the information, love, from outside. The spirit must work like a channel. It must take something to be able to give something. It governs itself from the inside and is closed to the outside. Not in the way that it doesn't take in information, because it has to take something in to be able to give. But it is closed in the way that no one can force a spirit to do anything. No one can take possession of the spirit of another person. The spirit can never be forced, only negotiated with. You can make him do something, but only to the extent he believes he needs what you have. If you have something he believes you need, then he will bend himself in almost any direction to please you. But it must be his action. It can never be an action from outside. The spirit is always active and never passive, which means that the spirit controls the electrical circuit of the body at all times. he does not only give information out or give the impulses out, but he also controls the impulses or picks up the information that comes back from the body to the mind or to the brain. We learned also that everything has two kinds of needs. We must have needs that generates function. And this is what enables and initiate the function, the electrical impulses to create an electrical circuit. That would be the power plug and the start button. And function sustaining needs, those which keep function going or feeds the function, which is the electrical impulses in the circuit. So we need both something to make the electrical impulses in our body, and we need a chemical intake, food, water, air, whatever else we have of physical needs, to make the function going. If you don't have gas to the car, it won't go. But if you have no electrical power, if you don't have a start button or knows how the start button works, then you can have all the gas in the world, all the nicest broccolis and spaghetti, and not spaghetti, probably not spaghetti, but the nicest broccolis and tomatoes and what you have in the garden, and it won't help you because you have no electricity. So life and correct function depends on fulfilled needs. If we want to stay in the middle of the road, not going out in the ditches, then all needs must be fulfilled. Here we will have normal function and health. If needs are not fulfilled, we must have dysfunction, which is disease. And in the end, if we don't change the way and steer back on the road to fulfill the needs of our being, we must die. Now, we realize we have the sustaining needs, the chemical needs. For how long can you go without fulfilling any of those? For some time. Yeah? I mean, we even have people staying on a not so healthy diet and they live until they're very old and they never have a disease and they never do anything. I mean, they live and they die happily. But can you go without fulfilled spiritual needs?
Some people think you can.
Well, they may live and die happily, but will they live again? No.
Obviously.
No. The thing is also, you may be able to eat just a little bit and still, without being fulfilled and still go on. But can you, if love, how can I say? If there is just a little bit unrighteousness, if you have a lot of righteousness and you have a little unrighteousness, do you have righteousness? Can you live from that? Can you live from less than 100% love? No, it's not possible. But all of those things, which has to do with the spiritual world, is not something we can touch. It's not something we can measure. It is only a thought process. And I think one of the most important things in this world is to understand what is thinking. Because if thinking creates the electrical energy in my body that helps me even digest the chemicals I put in, what will happen if my thinking is not correct? Then I will not be able to use those sustaining chemicals that my body needs to go on in function. Yeah? Do you see that when we weigh love and healthy diet is not going to help us if we don't know how to love. But what we are taught in church today is how to eat right. No one teaches us how to love. We talk about love as the end goal. We talk about when we don't love, that we have to stop that. But no one knows how to love my enemy. Now, thoughts are evaluation of information we encounter, and followed by decision making. They come from the spirit that perceives the information through our five senses. And what is information? It's everything around us that we perceive. It can be read, heard, tasted, smelled, felt. An action, a touch, a sound in a voice, a text in a book, one audible sentence of a word. Whatever we encounter around us, we perceive as information. Maybe you have read that man shall not live alone by bread, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. Maybe we've read it, but we didn't know how serious it was, or we didn't know that it was an actual fact. So love is what we live from. Just like the body lives from food, the spirit lives from information. We need righteousness, truth, harmony, security, liberty, orientation, understanding, meekness, patience, respect, responsibility, joy, peace, recognition, accept, loyalty, faithfulness, curiosity, knowledge, confirmation, reward, appreciation, morals, wisdom, and so on. The question is just, how are those needs fulfilled? Because we just learned in the sermon today, I think it was today, that we don't need appreciation. We don't need appreciation for ourselves, but we need to appreciate. We will come to that later. We have in the spirit different entrances of information. We have the spirit here in the brain cortex, and they are connected to the rest of the body that supplies with electricity. And we pick up information by ear, by nose, by taste buds, by feeling, and by seeing.
Yeah.
Oh, Siri is participating here. I'm sorry. And the question is, who in the human being hears? Can your ear hear anything? Can your nose smell? How do we know? On Friday we were talking about how chemistry cannot perceive anything spiritual. So what happens is just a physical reaction, and the spirit picks up the electrical information that comes in through the ears and then perceives an information. So the spirit is the guarding, it's the king of the country, you could say. And the brain is the capital city. He directs every organ and limb through the electrical impulses created by the thoughts of our spirit. So up here, over the brain, we have the spirit, invisible. No one can see him. We can only prove him by law, because nothing physical or chemical would ever have a spiritual need, so we know he must be there. And then he puts the electricity to the brain, and the brain controls the rest of our body according to our thoughts. And this works like this. This is the evaluation of information that takes place before any decision is made, any emotion or action comes out of us. We have the spirit, we have the brain cortex and the body, and here we have the ear as the senses of how to pick up an information. Then the information goes to the spirit, he perceives it and processes it, and he has thoughts about what he perceives, and he makes decisions, and when the decision is made about the information he perceives, he produces the electrical impulses, and that will give you feelings, emotions, actions, and bodily reactions. Now, this is the case study of a 12-year-old girl, which is me, the cavities and back pain. As I talked a little bit about in the children's story, I was the very well-behaved child of the two of us until the divorce. And after the divorce, I became a tyrant. I mean, when you're a child, you will always take the side of one parent. And you must take the side of, the one you sympathize with. And in this case, I would sympathize with my mom. And so just shortly after the divorce, I would boss my father around like nothing else, and my sister included, but especially my father. And I don't know what it is with fathers and their daughters, but they have sometimes just a very soft spot for daughters. And so I could make him go in almost any direction. Yeah, poor man. And after some time, I would have cavities, or during the 2 years after the divorce, I would have cavities, and I would have back pain. And this is not, nowadays we have cancer in children. We have everything in children. But it's not normal for a child, 12 years old, to have back pain. And I had it actually, it continued way through up high school. I sometimes had such a back pain that I couldn't sit up in school anymore. So every time we had a break, I would go outside the classroom and lie on a bench just to have a rest from my back. And one summer, I was working. We were living on the high school, and every summer we could apply for a job there. And we would paint the classrooms and the boarding school rooms. And I had so much pain, and it didn't matter if I sat or if I lay down or whatever I did. So I was just working, because if I stopped working, the pain was just the same. And it all came because of the conflict. Of course, the conflict that I took in from my home. The first year I was there, I felt quite good to be away from home, actually, because I remember especially one time I was traveling back to my home, and I got the information on my way home in the train that Mom and Dad were fighting because something about my little sister. Because Dad had not fulfilled his promise about something to my sister, and then Mom has to, attack the father, and then the father has to attack the mother. And on my way in the train, I thought to myself, I wish I could go back to school. I did not want to go home. Now, was it right that I wanted to stay away from it? Or was it selfish? It can never be both. You see, there is truth and there is lie. And the two of them never go together. I wanted to keep out of the conflict, but for whom? For me. But did I know? I had no idea. Because no one taught me that something inside of you makes you unable to love. Now, this is what happened. I took in some information before, or we always take information before, or all the time. And before the divorce, I had loving thoughts about my father and loving thoughts about my mother. And I felt quite free. I was the child in school that kept everyone together, because I really love harmony. So what do you got to do to make sure that everything is harmonious? You just be nice to everyone so that they pay you back with harmony. And now, after the divorce, the intake of information met the error of my heart. The era that believes that everyone must give me harmony because nobody gave me harmony anymore. I had thoughts of disappointment about my father. I felt hurt, and I wanted revenge. And I was very captive. I remember telling my mom after the divorce, I was just, 12 or 13 years old. And I said to her, Mom, when will we have some time of peace? Because even after the divorce, 'cause I felt a little bit relieved, to be honest, when my parents were divorced, because the fighting stopped in some way, or at least I wasn't exposed to it all the time. But I didn't realize that it would keep going just in different ways after the divorce. And for 2 years I thought, when will we have some peace around here? And thoughts like that must make you sick. It gave me bad electricity in my body. It gave me bad emotions, unfree actions, and disease. Everything became more difficult. I think if I was not already depressed by that time when I just was after the divorce of my parents, at least I was already in the direction. I think the first real depression hit me when I was a little bit older, maybe 21. But even through high school, I was not a person. At least I was trying to feed from all those around me to help me feel better. Now this is how our subconscious works, and it's really just our heart that Stephanie also talked about. Up here we have the consciousness, everything that we understand and see and recognize, things that are not hidden to us. They will. We have an awareness of physical and spiritual needs. I know I need harmony. Well, at least I know now. And I know that I need water and I need food. And I also register when information comes to me in my surroundings. I see when all of you are listening, or if you're sleeping, or if you're smiling, or if you're in disagreement, because the Spirit picks up everything about him or around him. Now, the physical needs is a signal from the body, or he gives a signal, the body gives a signal to help us realize our physical needs or our chemical needs. So if you don't feed the body, he becomes hungry. And if he doesn't get water, he becomes thirsty. And if you don't sleep, the human being will become tired. And the only way to help the spirit realize is that the body makes a signal that the spirit picks up and understands it's time to put on fuel. The spiritual needs are all the same in all individuals, but the amount differs from person to person. So some people are in great need of righteousness or truth or harmony, and some people may have a greater need for security or whatever it is, but we all have a need for all of them. Harmony, security, liberty. This is the heart, the part that we don't know about. And here the evaluation of loss and gain takes place. Now, maybe you know from Matthew 5 or 6, I think it's 6, that the heart needs a treasure. Have you read that? That the heart needs a treasure? Wherever the treasure is, there will your heart be. So the heart must always move after its treasure. So we will always go for what we believe is the treasure. Perceiving my spiritual needs fulfilled creates correct electrical impulses in the brain for the supplying of the body. That means every time I think I have gained the treasure, the electricity in my body will be perfectly fine. I'll be happy, I'll be joyful, I'll be healthy. And I must always avoid loss. And this is, up here we have the spiritual part of it. And then afterwards, when perceived, the brain represents the body. The body must move accordingly. So that means whatever action I do reflects my going for gain. If I act nice or not nice, it doesn't matter. It only represents the motivation of my heart. It only represents what I believe to be gain. How I think I can gain my treasure. If I want to gain my treasure, I have an action for what I think will be gaining the treasure. And anything that seems to me to be a loss of my treasure, I will never act in that way. So now we were talking about the two children in our home. One child believes she will gain the treasure of harmony by staying in line, and the other child doesn't know how to gain the attention, so she just acts in any way to get any attention. But she still does so to go for her gain. Does it make sense? Mm-hmm. So incoming information will lead to this analyzation and then making a decision that goes back to the will. So we start in the conscious. I realize the information outside of me. The information comes to my subconscious. I have an analyzation of gain and loss that I'm not aware about. And then the decision of my heart goes back to the will, and now I act out of that. So I am aware of my action, but I don't know from where it came. And I have thoughts and actions or no action. Now, the loss of the treasure would be unfulfilled needs. Perceiving loss to be unavoidable creates the bad electricity. I should turn this off. That's interesting. Siri never wanted to talk to me before, but it will create bad emotions, uncontrolled behavior, and disease. So when I perceive that I need something from someone else and I cannot get it, I will perceive that as a personal loss, and it will make me sick. Now, some time ago I had a patient, and it was a very nice patient. I see a lot of things in my patients, of course, after I've understood more about this information or about the message. And but some of them are just more clear to you. They just make you see things very, very nicely. And I had a patient, and he came to me after he had gone to the hygienist, and the hygienist had. I'm always very happy when they have already talked to her about diet and brushing and all those things, because then I don't have to go into that. And I don't spend so much time on that in general, but it helps the patient to see that it doesn't have to do with those things, because he had talked to her about it and he had changed nothing in his diet. And he had changed nothing in his brushing or his cleaning of his teeth. And he came to me and he said, I've never had cavities, or at least I've not had cavities for such a long time, and I don't understand why suddenly now. And he knew, because he had been at the hygienist, that it had not to do with his diet, and it could not have to do with his cleaning, and it could not have to do with any of those things. And I told him, it comes because you are stressed. And do men ever consider themselves to be stressed? Oh, there's a very honest man. I think even my father would say yes. But most men, at least when you ask them, nothing is wrong, they're perfectly fine. And they don't need help. Women, on the other hand, if you ask them if they're stressed, they pour out their life history on you, whether you have time for it or not. And this man, he thought to himself, I'm not stressed. And I thought, okay, well, you know, you never want to push the information. You just want to see if the door is open or not. And he had to come several times because it was, I mean, they were very, very big, those cavities. It took me a long time to fix it because that's the fun part about my job, to construct a little bit. And I'm very thankful there's a manual laboring part of my job. And the second time he came, he said to me, and I had not expected so, because he was a little bit of a reserved kind of guy. And he said to me, you know what, I've thought about what you said, and I realized that a few months ago, I lost someone very close to me. And do you know what I got from his words? I heard exactly what every one of us believes. Because can the human being lose anything?
Can we lose anything?
Can you lose anything? Why can you not lose anything? Because nothing is yours. No one is yours. But we believe that we can lose something or someone. And when we then understand or perceive a personal loss, we become sick. Do you know this is why usually, or not usually, but many times when we have a couple where one dies, it doesn't take so long before the other one dies also, because of the thought of loss. But this is just one example. We have this, it's all over the world. It's all over our lives. It's everywhere around us. If you speak to any person with a disease and try to dig down in their personal life, you will find the belief of a lost treasure. Either someone they think they lost, or someone didn't treat me as I wanted them to treat me. And this makes us sick. Now, I am not only reminded by my patients, the Lord is very good to me. He gives me all kinds of symptoms to remind me that something inside of me cannot love, so that I can go and resolve my issue. But just for a repetition, the heart of man goes always for gain. If I believe I have possessions of my own and that I can create my own love, I must give in order to receive, and I will get sick when I do not receive what I want, when I don't receive enough, and if something is taken away from me. But if I was in the truth, I would realize that nothing is mine, I cannot create anything, and loss would be not to give or keeping something for myself. So any symptoms are there to show us what we do not recognize as wrong. We know that the brain and the body needs food or chemistry from outside, from nature. We know that the spirit needs love. But the question is, from where do I eat? I thought it was a very nice illustration. We had the privilege to go to Tractor Supply this week. I don't know about, how the Americans came up with the idea of a store that has everything, but I really like it. In most all of your stores, you have everything in one place. In Tractor Supply, they are a little bit richer than any other store because they also have animals. And Noah took us to these very cute little ducklings, and we had to buy some. Look at them. Aren't they adorable? So we were looking at these ducklings last week, and I thought it was very interesting because Noah had put some food for them and some water, and It didn't take them too long to find the water because they really like to swim around. But eating out of the tray was a real difficult task for them. They would go and they would pick at the wall, or they would pick at the ground, or they would pick on the side of the water bucket. But they couldn't really find the food anywhere. And so Noah was, a little bit more smart than me, saying, they will find it. Just leave them alone, and they will find their way. But I was a little impatient, so I started feeding them with my hands. But, it's really cute with ducks that feed from your hands anyway. So I think nothing was lost. But after a while, they found the tray, which was really nice, of course. The idea is that we are exactly like these little ducklings. Sometimes God will let us try and go eat anywhere else because we have to realize that it will not fulfill us to go anywhere else. And so we eat at our spouse, or we eat at our children, or we eat from our siblings or our mother or whoever it is. And I don't know if you've ever read, but there's a nice place in Ministry of Healing where it says that God allows people in our lives to let us down so that we will realize the folly of leaning upon the arm of man. Isn't it nice? You see, we will not understand the deception of our heart or the wrong place that we try to get love from before we realize that those around us do not taste very well. And when we try to eat everywhere else, maybe we will go to the Lord and help us, and He will help us understand our issues so that we can take care of it. So how do we know if our love is love indeed? We will see it on the effect. If the effect is bad, we must recognize that something is wrong in the beginning of the channel. And we know that it can never be the supply of love that is lacking. The issue is only that we don't eat the right place. So I would think, when I was younger, I'm still very young, and I have a lot to learn, but when I was younger than I am now, I thought I was quite all right. I thought I was pretty charming. I was never really the best sister, but I thought I wasn't that bad. Now God placed me with a lovely sister. And I am reminded very often that I cannot love because I see that I want to feed from her and she does not taste as I want her to taste. I realized this week, Christine was saying, you're being very sisterly. And one would think that means love, but I don't think it does. It means that everyone can see we are related because we are bickering. Isn't it sad that the one you should be on, I should be on her side always. And I'm not. Isn't it sad? Those who are closest to us, that we should love the most, that we should help on the way to heaven. Isn't it sad that we cannot love them because they don't behave the way we want them when we want them to do it right now, the way I want it? I think it's so sad. But it gives us a lot of practice, and we don't have a choice. I tell you, if I could push a button that says, always love your sister, no matter what mood she's in, no matter how she behaves, no matter what she does, I would push the button. No doubt about it. But I don't have such a button. What I have is a heart that deceives me so heavily that I cannot even tell you. It's just... The effect or the symptom that I feel in my body
must always correspond to the cause in my heart. Whenever I have pain, whenever I have eczema on my hands, whenever I have stomach issues, I know for a fact that my heart has been deceived. Something in me is deceiving me. And I take it as my alarm. If something in my body is protesting, then I take some time to talk to God to find out what is it I believe that is not true. So, what is it that we believe about love? We understand that we're channel. Well, not that we're channel, but we understand that we have to give, because it's put in our heart that we must give, or in our being. So we give. I give to my little sister, but I give to get. You know, we say about love, it's a give and take, which is completely the opposite order of how God made it. I give something because then I think I can earn her harmony. And when I don't get what I want, I get angry, I get hurt, I start a conflict. And even if it doesn't come out of me, it will at least be inside of me. And maybe I get sick also. I had stomach issues this week. It's not good, but I know why. But you know, nothing is for free. Nothing we give for free. We smile. I would always, when I was younger, I would walk past people on the street. We lived in a small village, and I would walk past people on the street to smile at them to see how they would react. For who do you think I smiled at them?
What's that?
For who do you think I smiled at the people on the street?
For you.
For me, because I'd see if they would smile back at me. When we were in New Zealand, there was this lovely lady taking us around everywhere. And she took us to a cave of, do you know glowworms? They're like really creepy if you look at them under light. But when it's all dark, they glow in one end of them. And this cave, it was fully dark. And we were sailing in a boat, and it took us on the water, just having all these glowworms up in the roof or on the ceiling, or whatever you call that in a cave. And because of the water, it would reflect the light, so it was really beautiful. It looked like a starry night. And the guide taking us on the boat, he explained why the glowworm glows. Do you know why it glows? It glows beautifully to attract the other insects, and then he devours them. Do you know that's your sinful nature? That is what is inside of us. We glow, we smile, we charm the other one so that we can eat them. And when they don't taste like we want them, we spit them out. We isolate ourselves. We get angry. We cut off contact with those that we can't agree with. It's a sad story, but not so long ago, actually in the beginning of the lockdown, I started preaching in my own little church. I have a very small church at home where I come from, so I really appreciate the closeness. You know each other, and you have a good time together, and no one is left outside. We go home and eat with some from the church after church meetings, and I was preaching for a while. And I was pushing the urgency of the coming of God, of the coming of Jesus, because I really believe Jesus is coming very, very soon, sooner than we believe, or sooner than we are aware. You know, it will be all quiet, and it will look like it's normal times, and suddenly the crisis hits us.
And my church wouldn't disagree with that, but they would disagree with a lot of other things that I said. And so they told me, because this message is not the most popular message to bring, unfortunately, because I really believe it brings a lot of joy and liberty if you take the message and apply it. But there were some that didn't feel the same way, and they asked me not to preach anymore. And you can imagine what that did to my heart. There was another pastor in the other end of the country who had made a long analysis of something I did, of some preaching I did in Copenhagen. And he put a note on the door, and he took down the video from YouTube, and he said, "You shouldn't listen to Michala because she is leading people astray." Treating me like a false prophet. I took it very personally. And I knew my heart was deceived, and I thought, Lord, I don't know the purpose of coming to church anymore when no one will listen to me. And I read a few verses in my Bible that I interpreted in a very selfish way. You know, when they persecute you one place, you just take off the dust of your feet and go on to the other one. Had they persecuted me? No. Did I interpret it like that? Yes. And I knew I was wrong, but I didn't know how to solve the issue, so I went off for a while. I said, Lord, just for some time, I gotta go somewhere else to figure out my heart before I put my feet in this church again. And I went off, and God taught me that love is to never leave the other one, even if he betrays you. Did Jesus ever leave his disciples? Do you know that Judas was with him for 3.5 years, even though Jesus knew he was going to betray him? He never even corrected him. Judas, there is a place, I believe it's in John 18, I'm not exactly sure because I'm not the best at remembering where things are, but it says that Judas was with him in the garden where he normally took his closest friends or his closest disciples. A secret place or a nice quiet place that Jesus liked to go, his favorite place, and Judas was there with him because Judas was never left out of the company. And when I realized that God never leaves his children, I thought, if I am a child of God, then I never leave the children of God either, even if they betray me. Now they may throw me out one day, and that's perfectly fine, because that would not be my action. My action must be love, no matter and independent of what the other one does. But to be able to love like that, I have to know that my reputation is not my own, that nobody ever has to listen to what I say, that nobody needs to understand me, and nobody needs to love me. But I live not from the taking or a business transaction, but I live only by taking from God and giving to the other one. Now, the human being believes he lives from what he takes. Even when we have understood that we could not take from another person, we will still think we love from what we take from God. And truly enough, taking must be a process or be included in the process. But the heart that we have, our physical heart, shows us how love is actually working. You see, everything works according to the same law. Isn't it neat? That law of love, of taking to give, God put into all of nature that we may see how it works around us. I mean, to me, it's just astonishing. When I first came to understand the law for myself, it's a really simple principle, and you just apply it everywhere. One pattern that you pick up, and you just take everything you see and hear, and you put on the same pattern. And now you have a world that just expands before you. So our physical heart has an entrance of where the blood comes into it. But the blood comes in without oxygen, so it has to go through the lungs, and then then the blood will have oxygen. And then when the heart pumps out blood that is already oxygenized, it has little arteries going around the heart muscle. So the heart doesn't feed from the big vessels that take in the blood from the rest of the body or from the lungs. It is feeding from those very little arteries around the heart, and they do not get oxygen before the heart already gave blood to the rest of the body. So when the heart gives the blood to the rest of the body, the heart muscle is also fed with oxygen and nutrients. So there must be a taking from God, but it is not the taking from God that brings life. It is the passing on of what we took from God that brings life and health. And this shows us that a relationship with God is not about me. A relationship with God is about loving my neighbor. God is my supplier, but he doesn't supply me for the sake of me being happy. He supplies me for the sake of me loving my neighbor. And when I see the blood clotting up in my heart, I have to go and find out what's wrong in the beginning of the channel. Yeah? I gotta find out, why can I not love the church member when he is not being nice? And I can say to God, apparently, I am not taking love from you to give to the other one. I believe that I live from my own love, so when they reject what comes out of me, I believe they are rejecting me, because I believe I am the source of what I am passing on. So, with people like me thinking that they're quite all right, God must help us see our deception. And he does this different ways in different lives, but he does in every life at some point put something in front of us which is not so nice to help us be able to see what is inside of us. And therefore, by placing us in circumstances where our sinful nature is provoked to reaction, resulting in anger, annoyance, and depression, or anxiety, pain, and disease. Now, when I see those effects coming out of me, the first thing sinful nature will do is to judge itself. Go into self-condemnation. But even that is a breaking of the law, not understanding that if I have a sinful nature, I cannot do anything but sin. So instead of mourning my actions and my depression and my disease and my anxiety that I know is coming from selfishness, I should rather go to God and say, like Paul, I see that I sincerely want to do the good, but I cannot. And I don't know why. So help me, God. Help me, God, to understand what it is inside of me that makes me unable to love, so that I can take it away. Now, the issue is just that God has no access to you. Whose action do you believe it is to deliver man from his self-deception? Is it your action or is it God's action? Now, God has no access to you because with a sinful nature, you believe you are on top. You believe you are the well of water.
if you are the well of water, will you ever search for another well of water to draw water from? And since the spirit of man is self-governed and can only act from inside, God cannot reach him. Even after realizing his issue, the problem of humanity can only be solved by an inside action. If God were to solve your issue of your heart, he would take away your self-government. And then you would have no responsibility. There would be no judgment. There would be no salvation. Everything would be chaos. But we'll look a little bit into that in the next section. I think everyone might need a little bit of a break.